Hello everyone, welcome to our talk. It's so happy to be here in beautiful San Diego. Jasmine and I are software engineers at Pinterest. Has any of you never used Pinterest before? Raise your hand, please. Wow, I saw several hands. Those who raised your hands, feel free to leave now and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Or, if you stay with us, I will introduce Pinterest to you. And I promise you will love our product. Hopefully, at the end, you will enjoy our talk. Pinterest is a social media and web and application company. Our mission is to bring everyone the inspiration to create a life they love. Talking about Pinterest, most of you will think about fashion styles, haircut styles, designers, or home decorations. That's true. 70% of our users are females. However, Pinterest provides other cool stuff like mechanical keyboards or hardware pieces. If you create a pinboard, you can put full of different kinds of mechanical keyboard image there, and you can create another pinboard to add different pieces of hardware. I'm sure most of you will be interested about that, right? We'll keep growing. As August 2019, Pinterest has already reached 320 million monthly active users. In fact, 40% of our new sign-up users are men. Hopefully, after this talk, those who raised your hands will become our new users. Before I talk about how Pinterest is using Spinnaker, I would like to go through two major services at Pinterest, web and API. Web is serving for Pinterest.com. API sits behind the web, serving both web traffic and mobile app traffic. There are more than 200 engineers contribute to these two services, and we have more than 3,500 commits each month. Infra is the cornerstone for all this success. Here are some data for our infra footprint. We have more than 100,000 servers, more than 10,000 deploys per month, and we have thousands of services. Looking for a reliable, safe, continuous delivery platform become critical feature for us. That's why we adopt Spinnaker. Here's today's agenda. First, I will go through deployment history at Pinterest, and I will cover current CI/CD. After that, I will briefly talk about how we customize and productionize Spinnaker at Pinterest. Then Jasmine will go through our new CI/CD system. Also, she will do a demo. We will hold a Q&A session at the end. Feel free to ask us questions there. Cool. Previously, before we adopt Spinnaker, this picture displays how we do deployment at Pinterest. It involved a lot of manual work. It's like a chaos in manufacturing. We used to have a tool called Metroplex, which is a Slack bot tool. It helped us to do 2 scheduled deployments per day. And the commit from LAN to prod time was extremely high. It could take a few days at worst case. And from the right side, you can see the deployment change list contains hundreds of commits. It made the triage process very difficult if something went wrong. Here are some major pain points. The first one is operator has to manually kick off the deployment, and they have to constantly and frequently check in the test failures, exceptions, and even incidents. Besides that, deploy bot only provided synchronized workflow, which means deploy to multiple stages in a sequential way. The next deployment cycle could only happen after the previous deployment cycle completed. Very painful. Here's a picture of my dog stung by a bee by chasing some bugs, which expressed the same feeling when we were using Metroplex. We have learned our lesson. We realized Pipeline is a good solution to help us manage deployment in multiple stages in a consistent, reliable, and repeatable way. we were looking for some open source deployment pipeline tool. Why we adopt Spinnaker? There are two reasons. The first one is Spinnaker provided rich and advanced features, including deployment workflow and canary analysis. The second reason is Spinnaker is well supported by large community, including Netflix, Armory, Google Cloud, and everyone sitting here. Thanks for your support as well. Spinnaker helped us to implement automatically trigger pipelines by Jenkins job. It also helped us to run integration tests automatically. Besides that, with Spinnaker, we can run asynchronous workflow, which means we can run execution pipelines concurrently. We improved from 2 scheduled deployments per day to 25 deployments per day. Also, we decreased the commit len to prod time less than 4 hours. This dramatically reduced the operation burden and improving velocity of product release. From this diagram, you can tell we increased the number of deployments by at least 5 times, and we decreased the commit len to prod time by 1/3. From this picture, you can see on the left side, like I mentioned before, the deployment change list when we were using Metroplex was huge. It normally contained 139 commits. On the right side, you can see after adopting Spinnaker, each deployment change list reduced commits to single digit. Huge improvement. Finally, we are happy like my dog. Next, I will talk about how we customize and productionize Spinnaker at Pinterest. This is a picture displayed how many microservices we adopted from Spinnaker. You can tell we did not adopt Roscoe since we have our own AMI bakery process. We did not adopt Cloud Driver neither since we don't need to integrate with cloud provider directly. We use Teletraan, which is a Pinterest deployment system, to help us deploy to AWS VM. We customized the 3 services here, DEC, Orca, and Kayenta, to provide a Teletraan customer stage and provided an open PSDB plugin. I will cover that later. Here are 2 simple pipelines. The first one is master pipeline. It normally automatically triggered by a Jenkins job. Then it goes to next stage, which is integration test. It's a SubPipeline, which helps us to run all the integration tests. If everything looks good, it will go to next stage, which is SubPipeline called canary analysis. On this pipeline, first it will get a production build and deploy to both canary and control stages. Then we are running a canary analysis report based on these 2 stages. Service owner can set up score based on different thresholds. If the report looks good, it will deploy to production. Next, I will talk about how we customized Spinnaker. When we were using Spinnaker at Pinterest, we had some problem to integrate with our existing services. The first one is OpenTSDB. The reason we need this customization is Kayenta does not support OpenTSDB, while Pinterest is using OpenTSDB as our metric store. We did customize on both DEC Kayenta and Kayenta code base to add an OpenTSDB plugin. We also enabled OpenTSDB in Kayenta YAML file, which we deploy to Kubernetes. After that, as this screenshot, you can see customers can easily import OpenTSDB metrics from Spinnaker UI when they are setting up canary configures. The second customization is Teletraan customer stage. Let me add a little bit background here. Teletraan is our Pinterest deployment system to help us deploy multiple services to AWS VM. And Spinnaker pipeline calls Teletraan to do the actual deployment. Why we need this customer stage? Without this, we used to set up webhook stages on Spinnaker UI to make API calls directly from Spinnaker to Teletraan. There are two disadvantages here. The first one is we have to expose a token from webhook stage. And user can easily copy-paste this token to do some other hacky stuff to Teletraan, which is very dangerous. The second reason is user cannot see the actual deployment status from Spinnaker UI. They have to manually go to Teletraan page to check their deployment status, which is inconvenient. That's why we need a Teletraan customer stage to provide a better integration between Spinnaker and the Teletraan. From this screenshot, you can see we encapsulate all the authentication information, and we also can display the deployment status from Spinnaker UI. There's a link user can click and redirect them from Spinnaker UI to Teletraan, which is very useful. Next, I will cover 3 pieces how we did for Spinnaker productionize at Pinterest. The first one is security. This is the area we spend most of our effort on. I'm not sure how many of you had the same problem to make sure Spinnaker uses a consistent authentication permission with downstream services. We had this problem. We're trying to give users the same permission between Spinnaker and our downstream Teletraan services. Here's our solution. We make gate service talk to Pinterest OAuth server directly and get all the user authentication information. If the user went to Spinnaker UI and start execution on a pipeline to deploy to Teletraan, gate service will pass down this user token to Orca. Orca is a place we set up customized Teletraan stage. Orca will pass down this user token to trigger the actual deployment in Teletraan. The second case is if this pipeline is automatically triggered by Jenkins job, Orca will constantly pull our Jenkins job. Then Orca will pass down a script token, which is supported by a Teletraan environment, and to trigger the actual deployment. From Teletraan UI, you can tell the deployment is triggered by single user or script token. The next piece for security is authorization. We adopted Fiat service and integrate with Pinterest LDAP server so that we can grant different permissions like edit, read, or write on pipelines based on LDAP group users. The last piece for security is we made Spinnaker script stage read-only. Spinnaker script stage is very useful, but we feel like it's too powerful. Since users can run arbitrary script on these stages, and those scripts are running by a Jenkins job, which is very hard to set a code review process on Jenkins job level. Here's our solution. From Spinnaker UI, we made all the script stage read-only. If a user wants to update their script or they want to add a new script stage, they will reach out to our team, and we will review their script. After we merge their code into our repo, we will help those customers to update their script by calling Spinnaker API directly. Cool. So the next piece for productionized Spinnaker is log and monitoring. For logs, since all Spinnaker services are running on Kubernetes, first we redirect all the pod console log into a file on a mounted host volume. Then we are using a sidecar, which is a Pinterest internal logging agent running on the same pod but in a different container to ship these logs from host to Kafka. After that, we will create Kafka topic for each service and ship these logs to Kibana so that our user can easily search their logs from Kibana. For metrics, we use promises as our metric store. Promises will pull each Spinnaker service endpoint directly. And we also deploy the Spinnaker monitoring daemon to Kubernetes. Besides that, we have an in-house tool called Kubemetrics Exporter, which can export all the metrics from Kubernetes to Pinterest Open PSDB metric store. Once we set up all those service metrics, we created an alert based on high P90 latency. We also generated a success rate alert based on total successful requests. Cool. The last piece to productionize Spinnaker at Pinterest is deploy. We have our own Spinnaker repository at Pinterest. Basically, we cloned the latest release version from Spinnaker upstream. And we set up Jenkins' job to build all this source code into Docker image, then publish this Docker image to AWS ECR. After that, we will deploy a YAML file which contains the latest Docker version to Kubernetes. We use Spinnaker to deploy Spinnaker itself, which means we set up a testing Spinnaker environment and created pipelines on testing environment. Use those pipelines to deploy each Spinnaker services to production Kubernetes cluster. For scale, we rely on Kubernetes HPA feature, which can automatically scale both CPU and memory for us. Cool, enough talk from me. Next, Jasmine will cover our new CI/CD system, and she will do a demo. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine. So first, I want to thank you, Rainie, for the thorough introduction of how we leverage Spinnaker here as a continuous delivery platform at Pinterest. So Spinnaker has played such a game-changing role and has helped us smooth out the deploy process by a lot. And we are still building. So if you remember the graph that we showed previously that illustrate the Spinnaker microservices we adopted and how we integrate them with other services and platform. Now, please allow me to introduce Hermes as a new addition to this graph. So what is Hermes? It is a service we developed at Pinterest, and it will be used to directly interact with CI and CD platforms, including Spinnaker. With the introduction of Hermes, we encapsulate the process all the way from code committed to code deploy. Hermes provides us a one-stop operations. That way, engineers no longer need to hop between services and platform in order to build, deploy, and more. Also, because we provide out-of-the-box recommendations on Hermes, engineers who use it will only need to know and do minimum configurations. So it greatly reduces the confusions and engineering overhead. We also want to build Hermes on top of Spinnaker UI because then we can standardize the CD pipelines that are created and reduce the management overhead. We also can abstract the concepts provided by Spinnaker and hide the complexity behind the scene. Also, we make sure that this new tool can meet majority of the engineering requirements at Pinterest. Okay, so now it's demo time. My apologies that because of the security reasons we cannot do a live demo, but instead I have some recording here for better illustration. So in this the demo section, I will cover two topics. So first will be an example of a complex Spinnaker pipeline. And then the second one will be a deep dive into the Spinnaker extensions we built, which includes the Teletraan custom stage that Rainie has previously mentioned, and also the Kayenta integration with OpenTSDB. For the Teletraan customized stage, we will also go over 2 scenarios. And then the first one will be manual trigger Spinnaker pipelines with the authentication details passed down. Second one is to use the code merge CI pipelines as the trigger for Spinnaker pipelines. So as you guys can see, this is the Spinnaker UI, and we are in an application called Demo. And we have a few pipelines here. We have in total 4 at this moment. The first one is the master pipeline. So let's take a look at it. From the configuration, we can see that it is, the pipeline will be triggered by a Jenkins job. The first stage of this pipeline is integration testing. It is a sub-pipeline that lives in the same application, and it's called deploy to staging and run integration test, which we'll go over it shortly. So if the result of this stage is successful, then we will move on to the canary analysis stage. It is also a sub-pipeline in the same application, and it's called canary analysis. We will also go over the details shortly. So if the result of the stage is marked as successful, then we will move on to prod deploy, which is also a sub-pipeline. Okay, first, I'm going to demo let's go over the individual sub-pipelines. The first one is integration test. Let's take a look at how we configure it. So the first stage is deploy to dev. It is using our customized Teletraan stage, as we can see in the corner. And then down at the bottom, we have to provide some Teletraan configuration. Here, we can see we provided the environment name, which is Hello World Dummy Service-server. And then we have a stage name called dev. Also, we have some other information. We have to provide some other information, which is required by Teletraan. So if the deployment to dev is successful, we will then move on to the integration test stage. So it is actually essentially a Jenkins job that will be run against the dev environment. So next, we will go over the pipeline for the sub-pipeline for canary analysis. So the highlight of this demo is that the canary analysis report. It can only be generated because of the extension we built with Kayenta, which enables Spinnaker to talk to OpenTSDB, where metrics and stats are stored at Pinterest. So as we can see, there are 2 stages that will be run in parallel to begin with. They are deploy to control and deploy to canary. So both of them are using our customized Teletraan stage. And then scroll down, we can see the Teletraan configuration. They will be both deployed to the same environment, which is Hello World Dummy Service-server. The difference is the stage name. For this one, it will be control and some other Teletraan metadata information. And for the deploy to canary one, we just swap out the stage name and input canary here. So if both of the stages went well, we will proceed to the canary analysis. As we can see here, there is some dependency that's provided by Spinnaker pipeline. And this stage is using the Spinnaker native canary analysis. So we provide the canary analysis configuration here, which is Spinnaker intag-test. And we also provide the baseline and canary pair, which are the two environments we just made the deployment to. They are canary and control. We also customize the scoring threshold here, which will be used to decide if we want to mark the stage as passed or failed. Okay. So now let's take a look at an example of the canary reports. Take this one as an example. It is marked as passed, but it's actually not 100% because we set the threshold as 75. And on the left side, we can see there are a few metrics for CPUs, memories, and disks, which will be used for the actual evaluation. And the last one is the deploy to prod SubPipeline. So let's take a look at it. It is also using the Teletraan custom stage. And it is also deployed to the same environment, but this time the stage name is prod. So if everything goes well, then there we have our code successfully deployed to production. Okay, so the demo pipeline we just showed is actually mocked out from a production pipeline. And I really like how Spinnaker has enabled us to have a cleaner and more organized way to configure things. All right, so in the next demo, we will deep dive into the Teletraan custom stage we built for Spinnaker. And if you already forgot, Teletraan is our house-built deploy tool. So this is the UI of Teletraan. And as you can see on the top, the environment name is Hello World Dummy Service-server. And we are at the stage called dev. And we will show you our deploy history. So as we can see, the last deploy was done in November 15th, around 7:15 p.m. And we are going to make a new deploy through Spinnaker UI. So now we can see we have created a new pipeline called Teletraan custom stage. And let's take a look at what it does. So very straightforward, same Teletraan custom stage, same environment name, and the stage will be dev. And I'm going to start a manual execution. I will paste in a Teletraan build ID, and I'm going to click run. So we have a new pipeline that just got kicked off, and the status shows running. And then, meanwhile, we can also look at the execution details. And we will go back to Teletraan UI, do a refresh, and then we can see that a new deploy was actually kicked off, and the operator was me. So the state is still show as running, because the deploy is actually going to take some time. I decided to break down the recording into 2 parts. So after a little bit, we refreshed the page, and then we noticed that the last deployment by myself was already succeeding. And then let's go back to Spinnaker UI, and then we can also see the status has been updated succeeded. In the detail section, we can see the started time stamp is around 7:31 p.m. And then from the Teletraan deploy history UI page, it is showing as consistent. We have other Teletraan configuration information and also a link that will bring us back to the Teletraan stage. We just made the deployment to. All right. So that was how we integrate Pinterest OAuth to Spinnaker. And then the OAuth detail was passed down to Teletraan from Spinnaker. But in most of the cases, we want to be more hands-off. Therefore, we also have a way to support CI pipelines to trigger Spinnaker pipelines. Majority of the CI pipelines here at Pinterest are running on Jenkins. So let's take a look. So we're in the same environment again, same stage. The last deploy was the deploy that we just showed you guys. And then let's make a new one. We're going to use the Spinnaker pipeline called Jenkins Autotrigger this time. And as we can see, it pulls the status of a Jenkins job. And once the job has been completed, this pipeline will be triggered. So let's swap to the Jenkins job. It is called Spinnaker script. We are going to make a new build. So as we can see on the left side, 155 is the one that was just kicked off and then completed. It was pretty straightforward. So go back to the Spinnaker UI and then do a refresh. There we have the pipeline that's been triggered. And then we can see that it was triggered by a Jenkins job called Spinnaker script, which is consistent. And then we can go back to the Teletraan UI, do a refresh, and we can see that a new deploy has been triggered. The operator is shown as token, which indicates that it was actually triggered by a Jenkins job. All right, so similarly, because the deploy is going to take some time, I break it into 2 parts. So after a little bit, this deploy has also finished. So if we go back to the Spinnaker UI, we can see that the status of this pipeline has also been updated to succeeded. And then we can quickly check the timestamp. And yep, that was the one that was kicked off by Spinnaker. Cool. So we have covered a few demos previously, and they are production mock pipeline and some customization and extensions with both. And cool. So some closing thoughts. So we really have come a long way to get to where we are today. And we really appreciate that Spinnaker has, the introduction of Spinnaker has helped us by a lot to solve the problems we faced. that are the time-consuming and the error-prone, and a lot of manual effort involves CD pipelines. And then we're still building more on top of Spinnaker, which is Hermes, which will eventually, which will be the interface that wraps around Spinnaker and still uses Spinnaker as the orchestration engine. So the ideal goal we want to achieve is that we can enable the developers to be more productive and efficient at work during their work time, and then they can enjoy their life better after hours. Thank you. So now we're going to host a Q&A session, and I will welcome Rainie back to the stage.
I'll hand the mic to whoever has questions.
So I noticed that in your pipeline that does the canary analysis, first you deploy your apps into the dev environments, and after the canary analysis, then you promote it to prod. So does it imply that during that process, you already shift some traffic to the dev environments to gather the statistic?
So the question is, canary analysis was running between dev environment and production environment.
Right, where does the request come from is what I'm saying, what I'm asking.
Okay, so here's our master pipeline. From our master pipeline, we will run integration test, SubPipeline. That SubPipeline will run all the tests on dev environment. After that, we will go to the canary analysis stage, which run tests against canary and control. On these two stages, we compare the result. If everything looks good, it will eventually deploy to prod stage.
So the request only comes from the integration test, not from the real traffic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, what was the effort and what would you recommend the community do to improve the ability to integrate and do the changes you did on Spinnaker, say, to integrate with your deploy system? Any lessons learned from that effort? Maybe talk a little about how long it took and what could be done easier by the community so such efforts in the future are easier to customize.
Yeah, I think the pain point during our customization is the integrate Kayenta with OpenPSDB because it touches two parts. First one is that Kayenta. It's a dependent module imported into that code. And the second part is Kayenta code base. So if community could provide a better way to build that Kayenta code into that code, and we can easily import instead of rebuild using yarn and those commands, that will help us a lot. Yeah. Also, maybe we need to figure out an easy way to merging our own customized that Kayenta change into upstream. We haven't done that yet. Yeah, if we do some customization, we have to on top of the upstream code base. Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Anyone else?
I noticed you have mentioned two applications, Teletraan, and are those open source, or is it only for Pinterest?
Teletraan is open source. If you check GitHub Teletraan, you will find our code base. It's a deployment system to AWS VM. Feel free to download and use it.
Sure. Yeah. And also, could you tell us about Kayenta a little bit more? So what is the requirements for a canary to pass? Is it just based on CPU and memory, or was it monitoring anything else?
Oh, so for the requirement, service owner can import different metrics from our metric store. They can set up like CPU, memory, or even SR job, like those kind of metrics. And they can set up a threshold as a score. If all these metrics pass those score, we will mark this canary analysis report good.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any others? Last call. All right. Thank you, Rainie and Jasmine.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Sure.